I need him!
Do it.
We would be honored if you would join us.
In Rogue One, we get to see the first time the Death Star fired its super laser on Jedha City, which resulted in not only its complete and utter destruction, but also the destruction of everything around it. When Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso escaped the moon, the debris was still flying everywhere. So I wanted to know, what happened to Jedha? First off, the plan was for the Death Star to only destroy the city, not the moon. However, years later, after the Battle of Yavin, Luke, Leia, and Han travel to Jedha to make contact with Saw Gerrera's remaining rebels. What they find is catastrophic. The moon is nothing like it once was. It's nearly spilt in two, and its debris and ash rain down on the planet Jedha around it. Its mantle is completely ruptured, and it has magma seas and poisonous vapors that vent eternally into the sky. Despite the harsh conditions, people still live there. It's their home, and they feel an innate connection to it. Plus, there aren't many flights leaving the planet either. Life is no doubt extremely difficult, and part from the occasional smugglers, who use the ruined atmosphere as a base for cover. The people scavenge what they can to be able to afford things to eat and trade for supplies. In addition to civilians, Force worshippers still live there and travel there. And besides them, Saw Gerrera's partisans still fight there, since the Empire comes back to sift through the remains to look for remaining Kyber crystals, presumably to build Death Star 2. At first, they find it very difficult to find any more than a few handfuls due to the conditions of the planet, and the fact that Saw Gerrera's partisans are still there fighting against everything the Empire does. Once the Empire gets there, they begin to scan the planet for remaining Kyber and find an unnaturally high amount about 20 kilometers from Jedha City. They determine that it's all the Kyber that Saw Gerrera had captured from the Imperials, like we see in Rogue One when they steal the big Kyber crystals from the Stormtroopers. Every time they captured it, Saw buried them. But when the Death Star destroyed Jedha City, the resulting blast overturned the surface and churned up Saw's mother lode. As the Empire looks for the Kyber, they find it hard to sort the civilians who have stayed on the planet from the rebels fighting there. So they declare that anyone on the planet will automatically be treated as a rebel and will be killed on sight. When the Stormtroopers come to kill everyone, Luke is down on the planet with Saw's partisans. He springs into action and kills all of them with his lightsaber. An acolyte of the Disciple of the Wills, who is fighting with Saw's partisans, is with Luke and is amazed at his power in the Force. He hasn't seen anything like it since the ancient Jedi. Then the Empire drops a massive drill from orbit to extract the remaining Kyber. It's important to note here that Leia and Luke don't know why the Empire wants the Kyber, since they don't know they are trying to build a second Death Star, but they do know it will further damage the moon, so they resolve to destroy the drill with Saw's rebels. They attack the drill and lower its shields while the Falcon comes in and blows it up. It's the easiest victory in all of Star Wars, which means someone should have a bad feeling because nothing is ever easy with the Empire. It's now that the Leviathan appears, a massive mining ship the size of a city that literally pulls back the mantle of moons to mine their riches. In other words, it's so big the Falcon won't be able to blow it up. As the miner begins its mission, Luke and Chulko, the acolyte of the Disciples of the Wills, feel an inescapable pull to the crater where the Temple of the Kyber was destroyed and the cult of the Central Force worshippers reside. Leia tries to stop Luke from going since they'll desperately need his help against the miner, but he says he must learn what the Force has to tell him. Luke and Chulko gaze down into the chasm of the Death Star's blast for the answers they seek when suddenly Chulko is overtaken with the Darkside emanating from the hole and attacks Luke. Luke is caught by surprise and has no choice but to kill him. The comic doesn't explain why the Darkside is coming from the chasm, but we can theorize that it's because the Kyber crystals were forced to destroy so much life in that spot. So, the Darkside reigns. Most importantly though, it's in the moment that Luke realizes that while he has to learn to be a Jedi, he needs to put his friends first and see the bigger picture, since a Jedi always puts others before himself. So he runs back to help Leia and Saw's partisans, who receive the miner schematics from Chewie. It's during the planning on how to infiltrate the Leviathan and drive it into the crater that Luke learns about Jyn Erso and the Rogue One mission. He says he's glad he didn't know about all the sacrifices people made before him, just so he could take the final shot. If he had known everything, he probably wouldn't have turned off his targeting computer and would have missed. He realizes he can't run from danger or even flinch. If he does, then the people who come after him may not be able to take the winning shot themselves later. After this, it's basically a big fight for control of the Leviathan so they can plunge it into the crater. I'll just cover 3 notable things that happen here. The first is that the leader of Saw's partisan is wounded, so Han takes the command of a task force for the first time in canon. Second is the mining leader for the Empire named Queen Trios was the one who leaked the plans of the Leviathan to Chewie. Years earlier, her father was killed by Vader, and then she had to mine the remains of Alderaan after its destruction. It was then and there she resolved to fight against the Empire, and here she offers her services to Leia to be an inside agent working for the rebellion and offers her planet's resources. The third is pretty minor, but it's cool. Luke defeats an Imperial cyborg by frying his cybernetics with an ion torpedo from a TIE fighter. Nothing huge, but it made me laugh. In the end, the rebels drive the Leviathan into the chasm and it's destroyed. Han gives his medal from the Battle of Yavin to one of the heroes, which surprised me that he'd give that up, but Han probably doesn't really care. Except it's not actually his medal. Turns out he made a bunch of copies to sell to people for extra credits. I guess Han will always be Han. So that's what happened to the moon of Jedha. Unfortunately, in the comic they say that it'll basically keep disintegrating until there's nothing left, which is pretty sad, but also a result of the tyranny of the Empire and an even greater reason the rebels must fight against it. So what do you guys think? For me, the For Jedha rallying cry made by the rebels in the Battle of Scarif has even more meaning now. Let me know in the comments down below. Hope you enjoyed this canon video, leave a like if you did, and I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, remember, the Force will be with you, always.